In this video, we're going to take a look at jazz improv modes. And this is really the second part of the 5 stages of modern harmonic progression. In the first part, we talked about tertian harmony and how chords are put together. And in this part, we're going to be focusing on all of the different modes and scales that you can use as a jazz player to be a better improviser. Now, it's not necessary to know every single name, but it is a good idea to understand that whole concept of scales and how they play into the improvisation process. So the basic modes are essentially like this, and we are sticking to the key of C just to make things easy. A simple C major scale goes like this. In jazz, that's really called an Ionian mode. I don't know why they call it that, but that's just the name they came up with. And then if you move up the scale to the second note, you get a Dorian scale. So then why would you have 2 different names for 2 different scales that are essentially the same, that start on the same notes? And the answer is each of the scales has the half tones in different places. For example, in the Ionian scale, the half tones appear between those 2 notes and those 2 notes. In the Dorian scale, they appear here and here in different places of the scale. So that means that you should be thinking, when you're playing, for example, in D minor, you should be thinking D Dorian. It's just the way that the scale fits underneath the fingers and in the rhythm based on the chord that you're actually playing. If you're starting on the 3rd note, it's Phrygian scale. If you're starting on the 4th note, it's Lydian. If you're starting on the 5th note, it's Mixolydian, then Aeolian, and then finally Locrian. So those are the different modes. There's really only 7 of them. Is it important to know those names? Not really. I would think that the Ionian scale, which is the major chord, the Dorian, and the Mixolydian are the most important ones. Why? Because that would be a 2-5-1, D minor to G7 to C major 7. So those are the modes. So the way to think about this is any note of this scale is available. So for example, if we're doing a D minor Dorian, the scale or any note fits in any combination. And that's really the whole point of modes. It's like you can use the scale, but you kind of have to mix it up in order to make good music. Okay, so let's move on and tackle the bebop scales. The first one we have is the major bebop scale. It's the same as the C major scale, except it has an extra note to even out the beats of the bar. So instead of 7 notes in a scale, you have 8 notes. And that's really the whole point of bebop scales, is they add that extra passing note in order to even out the beats of the bar to make it easier to improvise. In this case, the extra note is the flat 6, which is the A flat. So if you're soloing, it would be something like this. Okay? And then the Dorian bebop scale is the same as the Dorian scale, except the passing note is now F sharp, which is basically the flat 4. So if this is the regular 4, flat 4. And then you have the melodic minor bebop scale. The regular melodic minor is this. But the melodic minor bebop scale uses the same scale in both directions, and the passing note is the A sharp or the B flat, like this. So what's the difference between using the regular Dorian bebop scale versus the melodic minor bebop scale? The answer is it comes in situations where you sort of least expect it. I think you can really mix them up and use both of them. So I kind of use both scales in the same thing. Okay, and then you have the harmonic minor bebop scale. So here's the regular harmonic minor scale. And then the passing note is now the C natural to C sharp. You're adding an extra C natural. And then you've got the dominant bebop scale, which is the same as the Dorian scale, it's just starting on a different note. You might hear sounds like this a lot. Okay, so the F sharp, again, same as the Dorian bebop scale, it's just putting in the F sharp as the passing note. And then we have the diminished scale, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the diminished scale because I do have a video about that. I'm going to put a link up here in the corner to go and take a look at the diminished scales. But essentially what they are is you play them over diminished chords. So for example, over this diminished chord, you would have this scale, whole tone, then half tone. They're really cool scales. You can use them a lot. If you overuse them, it just kind of sounds bland. So you need to mix them up with chords and scales and things like that. But the diminished scale can be very useful. Okay, the whole tone scale is basically every single note of the scale is a whole tone. It's interesting because now there's only 6 notes in this scale. They're interesting when it comes to patterns. Okay, and then of course the chromatic scale. It's basically every single note of the scale, or every single note on the piano. And then very useful is the blues scale. Doesn't matter what key you're playing in. Basically the blues scale is very important. It's characterized by the 3 notes in the middle and the blue tones. Basically the E flat, the F sharp, and the B flat. Okay, so the last thing I did for you was put together this little 2-5-1 bebop scale exercise, which I find is pretty useful when you start to think about how soloing is put together. In a moment, I'm going to give you a link to this sheet music for this cheat sheet that I've written out, and it'll include this exercise. So essentially what I've done here is I've gone up the bebop scale, and in the left hand, I'm playing 3, 5, 7, and 9 of D minor, dropping 1 note to become G7 or G13. So basically it has the 9th and the 13th and 3 and 7. The leading tones being obviously 3 and 7. So D minor to G7 or G13 to C major with a 13 and a 9. Those are great voicings to start. They're called rootless voicings, and they're great to use for improvisation. So in the right hand, I've gone up the bebop scale, the Dorian bebop scale. So this is Dorian bebop. And then I've done the dominant bebop, right, over G13. And then finally, I've finished off with the major bebop scale. So it goes like this. One more time. So why is the left hand playing on the and of the beat? And the answer is it's anticipating the next beat of the bar, but it's pushing the and, which means swing, essentially. And that's why I've written it like this. It's a good idea to get used to anticipating the next beat of the bar by playing on the and with your left hand. And then I've done it in the cycle of fifths. The next one is in the key of F. And then the last one is in the key of B flat. The interesting thing about this second one is I'm using a different inversion in the left hand. So instead of playing 3, 5, 7, and 9 like this, I'm changing the inversion. I'm basically taking the top two notes and moving them down to the bottom. So if it was this, take these two notes and move them down here. So the hand doesn't bounce around a lot. It's basically going from one chord to the next without bouncing around too much. And then finally in B flat, it's back to the original root voicings, 3, 5, 7, and 9 in that order. Okay, so there you have jazz improv modes and their usages, and I hope you got a complete understanding of what they all are and what they mean and how to use them. I think that last exercise is probably a good exercise in order to get the BeBop scale, which is probably the most useful scale in all of these, of course. Yeah, blues scale, very useful in others, but the BeBop scale is kind of like the cornerstone of how you approach jazz improv. Okay, so let me put a link to this sheet music. It's free to download. All you need to do is give an email address. I'll put a link up here in the corner so you can go and grab that right now. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you subscribe to the channel, go ahead and hit the little bell because you'll be notified of the upcoming videos that we're making. Thanks so much for your time. My name is Paul Tobey. I'll see you in the next video.